Rain traced long, steady lines down the cafe's wide windows, blurring the gray Chicago skyline into watercolor. It was a late Thursday morning in March, a time usually blocked off in Graham Walters' calendar for high-level board strategy. But the meeting had been canceled due to a delayed flight, and so for the first time in weeks, he had nowhere to be. He didn't particularly enjoy unscheduled time. In fact, he avoided it. Spontaneity was the enemy of control, and Graham Walters had built his entire empire and identity on control. As the founder and CEO of Walters Equity, one of the most successful real estate investment firms in the Midwest, he had earned every inch of his marble-floored penthouse and every article that labeled him a visionary. But today, he was just a man in a boutique hotel cafe, seated alone at a two-person table tucked into the corner, a black ceramic mug steaming between his hands. His coat hung neatly on the back of the chair, his phone silenced and placed screen down. The low hum of jazz floated through the air, interrupted occasionally by the clatter of cutlery or the barista calling out names. He wasn't used to silence. Not this kind. And for a few minutes, it actually felt grounding. Then he saw them. 3 little girls entered the cafe, moving slowly, cautiously. Identical. Blonde curls tucked behind their ears, matching green jackets and pale blue sneakers. They couldn't have been older than 6. They clutched each other's hands tightly like a formation rehearsed in secret. One of them looked up, directly at him. He blinked. At first he thought it was coincidence. Maybe they were hotel guests. Maybe their mother was right behind them. But something about the way the middle one tilted her head, that familiar, thoughtful squint, made his heart skip. They walked toward him. The girl on the left reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small object. When she stepped closer and placed it on his table, Graham felt the air suck from the room. It was a silver necklace. A thin chain with a heart-shaped pendant, worn at the edges, slightly tarnished, but unmistakable. He had bought it 7 years ago in a small artisan shop in Santa Fe. Gave it to Maya Anderson, the only woman who ever made him feel unsure of himself, as a spontaneous gift one evening when she joked she never owned anything real. And then she vanished. No warning, no fight, just a single message on his phone. "I'm sorry. I had to go. Please don't try to find me." He never did. He built more buildings, signed more deals, made more millions. But that necklace haunted him, even if he'd never admit it. His fingers trembled as he picked it up. "Where did you get this?" he asked softly. The girls said nothing, but they looked at each other with subtle nods. And then, from the entrance, a voice, hesitant, cracked by time. "I gave it to her." He turned. Standing in the cafe doorway, soaked from the rain and out of breath, was Maya. She was older now. Her hair was longer, pulled back. Her eyes were the same, sharp, observant, but heavier. She wore a beige coat that clung to her damp frame, and for a moment she seemed to consider running again. But instead she stepped forward. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said quietly. He didn't stand. Couldn't. He just stared. He couldn't finish the sentence. Maya nodded slowly. "Yes, they're yours." He looked back at the girls. Suddenly everything aligned. The hair, the mannerisms, the expressions that haunted him in dreams he never dared speak of. They were his. His throat tightened, and for once in his life, Graham Walters didn't know what to do. Not in a boardroom, not in a press conference, not here. "I was afraid," Maya continued. "Afraid of what it would mean, of becoming a problem in your life. I didn't want to ruin everything you were building." He couldn't find anger, only disbelief, confusion, and something else, grief, for the time lost. "You left without letting me choose," he whispered. "I know." A long silence passed. The rain fell harder now. People around them were watching, But neither of them noticed. For a man who'd built his life on precision, Graham felt everything unraveling. And strangely, it wasn't terrifying. It was relieving. He looked at the girls again, and one of them, the one who'd given him the necklace, gave a shy wave. He smiled, just barely. "I'd like to talk," he said, finally standing. "Not about the past, about now." Maya's shoulders eased just slightly. "Okay." And that's how the man who once thought legacy meant numbers and buildings began learning it might mean something smaller and much more human. The following Saturday, Graham stood in front of the modest two-story brick townhouse on the north side of Chicago, staring at the chipped mailbox with the name Anderson fading from sun exposure. It was far from the world of glass towers and private elevators he was used to. Still, it felt more intimidating than any corporate negotiation he'd ever faced. He took a breath and rang the bell. Maya opened the door, hair still damp from the shower, wearing an oversized sweatshirt and jeans. Her expression was cautious but soft. She stepped aside without a word, and he entered into a living room filled with the quiet chaos of a home where 3 6-year-olds lived. Crayons on the coffee table, a basket overflowing with tiny shoes. A framed drawing on the wall labeled "Mommy and Us," with 4 stick figures holding hands. No father drawn. The girls sat in the dining area whispering behind the backs of their chairs. When they saw him, they froze, then giggled, hiding their faces. "Hi," he said gently, his voice awkward and unsure. They stared at him like he was part of a story they'd only half believed until now. Eventually, one of them, the same bold one from the cafe, waved again. "Hi, mister." Graham crouched down slightly. "You can call me Graham. Or whatever you want." They exchanged looks. One of them said, "We call you the serious guy." Maya laughed quietly from behind him, and something in Graham's chest loosened. Over the next weeks he showed up, not with grandeur but with effort. He took them to a park downtown, where they ran through water fountains and made him hold wet mittens. He read bedtime stories over video calls when traveling, learning to pronounce names of cartoon characters he'd never heard of. He took them to an art exhibit once, and one asked if any of his buildings had paint on the walls that moved. He started paying attention to those things. His office changed too. Meetings were pushed earlier so he could leave by 5. His penthouse, once sleek and minimalist, began accumulating drawings, snack wrappers, and a new guest room with bunk beds. His assistant Karen joked that the corner office now smelled faintly of peanut butter crackers. Through all of this, Maya remained cautious. She was always nearby, watching, listening, never intervening, but clearly unsure if this was just temporary. She worked as a freelance editor from home, and Graham noticed how often she forgot to eat when deadlines piled up, how she always checked the girls' backpacks twice, how she hesitated when he reached for her hand on the 3rd visit. One night, after putting the girls to bed, she walked him to the door. "You don't owe me anything," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "I just don't want them to get hurt." "I don't either." They stood in silence for a while. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't nostalgic. It was something raw, the cautious rebuilding of trust between two people who had lost more time than they should have. Graham didn't press. He didn't promise a future. He only promised the next Saturday. And then the one after that. And slowly something shifted. The girls no longer giggled and whispered when he arrived. They ran to him. One brought him a drawing of Daddy in a tie. Another asked if he could come to school career day. And the last, the shyest, fell asleep on his shoulder during movie night, her tiny hand clutching his thumb. He sat there, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loudly, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Belonging. By early May, the rhythm between Graham and the girls had become something close to natural. He knew who preferred apples over bananas, who liked their hair braided, and who refused to wear socks with seams. He had a calendar full of sticky notes color-coded by school events, dance rehearsals, and weekend outings. But life didn't pause for rediscovery, especially not his. Back at the corporate headquarters of Walters Equity, the board was growing impatient. Rumors circulated that Graham's focus was slipping. A delayed project in Dallas, a missed flight to a major investor summit in Phoenix. At first he dismissed them, but when his CFO Alan Ross called an emergency meeting, it was clear something was shifting. "You're taking time off like someone who's retiring," Alan said bluntly, pacing the office. "We've had to reschedule a dozen meetings around family things." "Is this permanent, Graham?" Graham sat behind his desk, visibly different from the man who once barked through conference calls without blinking. His suit was still pressed, but his eyes were tired. Not from stress, from balance. "I'm not stepping away," he replied, "but I'm done working until midnight and pretending that my time doesn't belong to anyone else." Alan didn't understand. He didn't have children. Didn't know the way a single, "Daddy, are you coming?" from a 6-year-old could dismantle decades of priorities. That night, Graham didn't return to the penthouse. He stopped by Maya's instead, holding a grocery bag with the wrong type of pasta and the right kind of juice boxes. He found Maya sitting on the porch, her laptop closed beside her, worry lining her face. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, slowly. "Just watching the news. They're talking about Walters Equity. Headlines." He sighed. "Yeah, the vultures are circling. You care?" "I care about keeping the company healthy, but I'm not going to disappear on them like I disappeared on you." She looked at him cautiously. "That's not what happened." "I know, but it's how it felt." She swallowed hard, then shifted the subject. "The girls were asking if you'll be at their recital next week." He smiled faintly. "I rescheduled a summit in Miami to be there." She laughed softly. "Wow." Graham Walters, skipping a billionaire mixer for a tap dance routine. He leaned against the porch railing. "Don't tell the board." But conflict wasn't only in the boardroom. That Sunday, while helping with homework, Graham saw the first sign of real emotional fallout. The girls had been assigned to draw a picture of their family. One of them, Sophie, drew Maya and her sisters standing in a park, but Graham wasn't there. He tried to brush it off, but it stuck. Later that evening, while folding blankets, he gently asked her why. She didn't look up. "Because you don't live here." The sentence hit harder than anything Alan Ross had said. Maya saw the look in his eyes and said quietly, "She's not wrong." He didn't reply. He just stared at the drawing again, realizing that despite the progress, he was still a visitor. Present, but not rooted. Later that week, during a routine coffee run, Graham was spotted with Maya and the girls by a reporter from a small but notoriously gossipy real estate publication. The next day, a headline appeared. "From boardroom to backyard, is Graham Walters trading equity for fatherhood?" His inbox filled with emails, some mocking, others supportive. But one from a major investor was direct. "We need clarity. Are you in this for the long run, or should we start looking for a successor?" That night, Graham stood alone in his office, holding the framed photo from a recent Sunday picnic. Maya laughing, the girls mid-giggle, one on his back, another wearing his sunglasses. And in that silence, he realized something. He had built an empire on acquisition, but he'd never belonged to anything. Until now. Still, choices had to be made. He couldn't keep living in two worlds without losing one. And the world he wanted now wasn't made of steel and skyline. It was small, loud, messy, and very much alive. The following week brought a shift in the air, not just in Graham's schedule, but in the way the world around him responded to his quiet transformation. His assistant Karen, who had once booked his flights with military precision, now added school events to his calendar without question. She even printed out a coloring page of a unicorn for the girls, paper-clipped with a post-it that said, "For your board of directors at home." But not everyone adjusted so easily. Maya's mother, Lorraine, came to visit from Michigan. She was polite but guarded, a woman who had watched her daughter raise 3 girls alone for 6 years and didn't entirely trust the man now orbiting their lives. Over dinner, Lorraine spoke softly, cutting vegetables with the same intensity she used to slice through pleasantries. "Graham, what happens when work pulls you back? You're a CEO. That doesn't just stop." Graham met her eyes evenly. "You're right, it doesn't, but I've changed how I define success." She nodded slowly, unconvinced. "I just don't want them to lose him twice," she said, gesturing toward the girls playing in the next room. Maya didn't interrupt, she just watched. That night, after Lorraine had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Graham found Maya sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a spreadsheet of freelance deadlines. A half-eaten sandwich sat beside her. "She's not wrong," Maya said before he could speak. "They're falling for you, fast, and I'm scared of what that means." "I'm scared too," he admitted. "But I'm here. That's the only promise I can make, that I'll keep showing up." It wasn't a grand speech, just a steady one. And that was what she needed. Meanwhile, the girls developed quirks of attachment. One wanted to braid his hair, even though he barely had enough. Another left him little notes in his jacket pockets. The third asked if she could call him Daddy sometimes, but only in the morning, because that's when you make pancakes. Each moment brought Graham closer. And yet, with each step deeper into their lives, the stakes grew heavier. One day Maya received a job offer from a small publishing house in Portland. Full-time, with benefits and a flexible schedule. It was her dream, to edit books in a real office, not just from her couch, but it also meant moving across the country. She told Graham late at night, her voice barely above a whisper. "I haven't said yes. I don't know what to do. I don't want to take them away from you, but it's a real offer, and I earned it." Graham sat in silence for a long time. He could have made a dozen arguments, bought her a house in Chicago, offered to fund a private press for her to run here, but instead, he asked one question. "What do you want, Maya?" She blinked. "I want both. I want the job, and I want you." For the first time, their subplots collided. Her independence, his transformation, the needs of 3 girls who didn't know what compromise meant. "I'll fly to Portland every weekend if I have to," he said. "But I won't let them grow up thinking that work always wins." In that moment, Maya smiled, not because he had solved it, but because he wasn't running from it. The day of the school recital arrived beneath a cloudless spring sky. Graham wore a navy blazer instead of a suit, at Maya's gentle suggestion. "You'll blend in better with the other parents," she had said with a soft smile, and he found he didn't mind. He wasn't there to impress shareholders. He was there to be someone's dad. The auditorium smelled of cafeteria pizza and glue sticks, filled with rows of folding chairs and murmurs of proud families. Graham arrived early, something he never did for business meetings, and saved 5 seats in the 3rd row. Maya arrived moments later with the girls, all 3 dressed in matching blue dresses with ribbons in their hair, cheeks flushed from excitement and nerves. When the girls spotted him, their faces lit up like floodlights. Sophie, the boldest, ran down the aisle and threw her arms around his legs. "You came!" "I promised I would," he said, lifting her slightly. "And I always keep my promises." Maya watched the interaction, her expression soft, but guarded. Trust, Graham had learned, wasn't rebuilt in a single gesture. It was rebuilt in thousands of small ones. As they took their seats, Graham handed each girl a tiny envelope with a hand-drawn animal on the front. Inside were small good luck notes he'd written that morning. "To my brilliant artist, to my brave dancer, to my quiet genius." He didn't label them by name. He wanted each of them to feel individually seen. The curtain rose. The lights dimmed. Music began. And when the girls stepped onto the stage, Graham's breath caught. They were clumsy, out of sync, adorably chaotic. But to him it was perfect. The entire auditorium blurred as he watched them beam with joy, stumbling through the choreography like they had been born to do it together. At one point, Chloe glanced toward the audience mid-performance, as if to make sure he was still there. He met her gaze and gave the smallest nod. She smiled back, relaxed her shoulders, and continued dancing. After the show, while parents crowded the lobby with flowers and phone cameras, a reporter from a small local paper approached them. "Mr. Walters, correct?" she asked. "Would you mind a quick picture of you and your daughters? It would be lovely for our community feature this week." "Families in focus?" Graham froze for a moment at the word daughters. Maya glanced at him, unsure. "They'd love it," he said, his voice steady. He knelt down, arms around all three girls, while Maya stood behind them. One of the girls kissed his cheek right before the flash went off. And just like that, the photo captured something that had been quietly forming for weeks, a truth too big to hide. He wasn't visiting this family anymore. He was becoming part of it. But by Monday morning, that simple family photo had become a catalyst. The image went modestly viral. First among local circles, then on LinkedIn, then a parenting blog picked it up. From billion-dollar deals to ballet slippers. The CEO who chose recitals over the boardroom. Geen. The article praised his vulnerability, his fatherhood, and called him a new kind of executive. But the business world didn't share the sentiment. At 9 a.m., Alan Ross called him into an emergency board meeting. 12 faces, one long table. "You're making headlines for the wrong reasons," Alan began. "Our investors are questioning your commitment. We're fielding emails asking if we've lost leadership stability. Some are even discussing pushing for your early resignation." Graham remained calm. "I've already prepared a proposal," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "It's a succession plan. You'll take interim CEO. The team is ready. The company is strong enough to survive without me at the wheel." Silence. "You're serious?" Alan asked, startled. "You're stepping down?" "I'm stepping back," Graham corrected. "Because I finally understand something. Legacy isn't just about what you leave behind in buildings or markets. It's about who you become when nobody's watching, when your daughter looks up from a stage, searching for you in a crowd." Someone chuckled nervously. But Graham didn't waver. "You all know how hard I've worked to build this. I'm not abandoning it. I'm choosing not to let it swallow me whole." When the meeting ended, he stepped outside and took a long breath of city air. For the first time in years, it didn't smell like pressure. It smelled like freedom. That evening, he returned to Maya's house with pizza and a small box. Inside were 4 silver heart pendants, exact replicas of the one Sophie had handed him weeks earlier. 3 smaller ones for the girls, 1 larger one for Maya. She opened the box slowly, her eyes filling. "You didn't have to," she whispered. "I didn't do it because I had to," he said. "I did it because I want this. You, them, us." She looked at him uncertain. "Even now? After everything with your company?" Graham reached into his pocket and pulled out the crayon drawing Chloe had given him weeks ago. It was folded, worn, clearly kept close. "This is what I want to protect now." And she kissed him. Not out of relief or nostalgia, but because she believed him. The weeks following Graham's departure from the company moved slower than he expected. Not because of regret, but because the pace of life was different now. There were no status meetings, no morning rush to beat traffic, no PR teams crafting statements. Instead, there were school drop-offs, spilled cereal, last-minute sock hunts, and the gentle chaos of family. It was unglamorous and utterly grounding. Graham moved into a small but warm 2-bedroom rental 5 blocks from Maya's house. It wasn't a penthouse, and he didn't care. He wanted proximity, not prestige. He furnished it modestly. A couch big enough for 3 small bodies, a coffee table that could survive crayon attacks, and a bookshelf half-stocked with bedtime stories. On the first weekend after his move, the girls came over with overnight bags and high-pitched excitement. They raced from room to room, calling dibs on sleeping spots and laughing so loudly the neighbors knocked, just to make sure nothing was on fire. Chloe clung to him during movie night. Sophie wanted to reorganize his kitchen. Emily insisted on helping him fold laundry, even though it took twice as long with her help. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Meanwhile, Maya watched the shift from a quiet distance. She still worked late into the night editing manuscripts, now with a desk Graham had assembled for her as a surprise. He dropped off coffee for her most mornings. Sometimes with flowers, sometimes with notes scribbled on post-its. Your voice matters more than any headline. One evening, while they were cooking dinner together, her stirring sauce, him slicing vegetables with too much caution, Maya finally spoke what she had held inside. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. He paused. "The company?" She nodded. "The power, the pace, the attention." He thought about it. Not in passing, but deeply. "I miss the people. The way we built something out of nothing. I miss solving problems, pushing limits." He turned to her. "But I don't miss being alone. I don't miss needing to prove myself every second of the day." Maya smiled. "You don't have to prove anything here." He leaned in and kissed her temple. "That's why I stay." But not all consequences were quiet and gentle. Alan called a week later to let Graham know that one of their anchor investors had officially pulled out. It was a blow, but not a fatal one. "We'll recover," Alan said. "But the press won't stop. They still want statements, interviews. They want to know if you left because of a scandal or a breakdown." Graham exhaled slowly. "Then tell them I left because I found something I was willing to lose everything else for." Alan was quiet for a moment, then laughed softly. "You've changed." "I hope so." Later that week, Graham took the girls to the Field Museum. Not as a grand event, but just as a father trying to give them a memory. They wandered through dinosaur skeletons and ancient artifacts, stopping too long at a gemstone exhibit because Emily insisted the pink one looked like a jelly bean. At lunch, Chloe looked at him and said, "You're not like other daddies." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that good or bad?" She shrugged. "It's just, you don't go away. You stay, even when it's boring." Graham laughed. He reached across the table and ruffled her hair. "That's the whole point, sweetheart." Summer arrived slowly in Chicago, like a hesitant guest, unsure if it was welcome. The wind still carried a bite, but the days stretched longer, and sunlight lingered through dinner. For Graham, the season marked the first time in years, where life wasn't measured by quarterly reports, but by things like school calendars, playground routines, and how many bandages a father should reasonably carry in his wallet. The girls were growing fast, not just taller but louder, more curious, more fearless. They no longer hesitated to call him Dad, and they stopped asking if he was staying. His presence had settled into something unquestioned. He helped with math homework, badly, tied ballet slippers, clumsily, and negotiated bedtime like it was a hostile acquisition. But then came the moment that tested him deeper than any negotiation table ever had. One afternoon, Maya received a call from Portland. The job was still open, but this time it came with a timeline. The company had expanded, and they were offering not just a desk, but a team, a chance to lead. The kind of offer Maya had once dreamed of, long before diapers and kindergarten pickup lines. "I haven't said anything to the girls yet," she told Graham that evening, sitting beside him on the back porch. "I don't want to confuse them, or make promises I might not keep." He nodded. "What do you want?" She looked at him, vulnerable. I want the job, but I don't want to pull them away from you. They're finely rooted, and you're here every day. It's more than I ever thought you'd give." He could have begged her to stay, bought her a local opportunity, found a workaround. But Graham Walters, the man who once believed only in expansion, control, and measurable outcomes, didn't. Instead, he said, "Then we figure it out together. I'll fly with you to Portland, help you see it. Maybe I'll spend half the month there, half here. We build something new." "Again?" She looked at him shocked. "You'd move?" He hesitated. "I'd stretch. For you. For them. We just got each other back. I'm not letting distance take it again." The trip was booked. A weekend in Portland, just the two of them. Maya's mother agreed to stay with the girls. It would be the first time Graham and Maya were truly alone since their reconnection. The city was beautiful, wrapped in green and soft light. The office Maya would work in was warm, the team welcoming. They explored neighborhoods, tasted local food, and walked through bookstores that made Maya's face glow like the sun. "I forgot what it felt like to want something just for me," she admitted. "And I forgot how to support someone without needing control," he said. That night in the hotel they lay side by side, fingers intertwined. "I want them to see us try," she whispered. "Not just coexist, not just get by. I want them to see love that evolves, that bends." "Then let's bend," he whispered back. Returning to Chicago, the conversation shifted. They started talking about hybrid plans, renting in both cities, creating routines that honored both their needs. Graham even began consulting for a nonprofit in Portland remotely, helping them manage real estate expansion in underserved communities, a cause he had once ignored in favor of skyscrapers and luxury towers. He was still using his skills, but now he was using them with intention. Back in Chicago, the girls sat with them one evening as Maya explained the possibility of moving. Not immediately, not permanently, but as part of something the family would figure out together. At first, they were quiet. Then Sophie asked the one question that mattered most. "Will Daddy come too?" Graham looked her in the eyes and said, "Always." From that moment on, the plan wasn't built in silence or secrecy. It was a family blueprint, one sketched out in crayon schedules, shared calendars, and honest talks over mac and cheese. And Graham, for the first time in his life, was building something that didn't require cement or steel. Just commitment. As July came to a close, the days grew heavier with heat and unspoken decisions. The Portland plan had begun to take shape, slowly, delicately, like a bridge suspended between two coasts of their lives. Maya had signed the contract. The start date was 2 months away. They agreed on a rhythm. She'd fly ahead first with the girls, settle into the new house, and Graham would follow later that fall after finishing out his mentorship commitments in Chicago. It was logical, fair, mutually agreed. And yet, beneath the practical planning, an invisible weight built inside Graham. Not doubt, not regret, but something closer to grief. A soft ache that came from knowing he was about to say goodbye to this version of their life. The Chicago mornings, the backyard dinners, the rhythm they had created so naturally. He didn't speak it aloud. Not yet. Instead, he poured his energy into the transition. He helped pack boxes. He coached the girls on how to fold clothes, CEO style, which, admittedly, just meant neatly. He sold the penthouse officially, donating most of the proceeds to an organization that built affordable housing for single mothers. A gesture Maya didn't ask for, but one that moved her deeply. Still, as moving day approached, tension began to seep through the cracks. It started with the girls. Subtle shifts in behavior. Sophie became clingy, asking over and over who would tuck her in once they got to Portland. Chloe refused to say goodbye to her best friend at school, pretending nothing was changing. Emily began sleepwalking again, something that hadn't happened since Maya's mom last fell ill 2 years earlier. Maya tried to stay calm, but Graham could see the strain in her jaw, the way she triple-checked their flight itinerary and reorganized the same drawer twice in one evening. One night, after the girls had gone to bed, Graham found her sitting on the back porch, arms wrapped tightly around her knees. "They're scared," she admitted. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but maybe I pushed it too fast." He sat beside her. "You're not wrong to want this," he said. "You're showing them what it looks like to dream and build and not apologize for it." She looked over at him, eyes tired. "I don't want them to remember this move as the time everything fell apart." They won't," he said softly, "because we won't let it." The following weekend, they held a goodbye picnic at their favorite park, the one with the dragon-shaped slide and the ice cream truck that never had the right change. Friends came and went. There were hugs, cards, photos, and a few tears. But the moment that stuck with Graham happened near the end. As the sun dipped low, Chloe tugged his hand and led him away from the crowd. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket, a drawing. 4 stick figures stood under a rainbow. 3 small, 1 tall, all smiling. Above them, in pink crayon, it said, "Us, even when we're far." Graham knelt and hugged her tight. And in that moment, something in him clicked. The life they were building didn't exist in a city or a timeline. It existed in them. Wherever they were, if they kept choosing each other, the love would hold. Later that night, he and Maya sat at the kitchen table, finalizing plans for the Portland move. "No more adjusting," he told her. "This isn't just your dream. It's ours now." And she smiled. Not the uncertain smile of someone hoping for the best, but the steady one of someone who believed in what they were building. The day of the move arrived, wrapped in bittersweet silence. The moving truck had come and gone. The Chicago house stood mostly empty now. Bare walls, echoing floors, and only a few boxes labeled "Essentials Plain" near the door. The girls wore their favorite outfits, already a little wrinkled from the early wake-up, and sat cross-legged on the carpet where the living room couch used to be, playing a final round of their favorite memory game. Graham paced the kitchen, not out of nervousness, but out of the overwhelming weight of change. Every sound in the house, the creak of the floorboard near the pantry, the wind brushing the screen door, felt like a goodbye. A permanent one. Their flight was in 3 hours. Maya was in the girls' bedroom, checking zippers and luggage tags for the 3rd time. Everything was ready, except Graham. He stood at the sink, gripping the counter, staring out at the backyard where he'd once hung twinkle lights for a surprise family dinner. The lights were gone now. The grass looked uneven, trampled from endless games of tag. And yet, he'd never seen it more beautiful. "Graham?" Maya's voice came from behind him. He turned. Her eyes scanned his face. She knew. She always did. "You're not coming with us today." He didn't answer right away. Then he exhaled. "I will come. Just not today." She nodded, unsurprised. "I don't want the girls to see this as the day I disappeared," he said. "I want to do it right. I want to close things properly here. I owe them, and you, that." She stepped closer. "They'll ask. They'll miss you. I'll be there in a week, 10 days at most." He reached into his pocket and handed her a small envelope. Inside were 4 boarding passes. One was his. "I already bought it," he said. "Seat 22A. Her eyes welled, not because he wasn't coming now, but because he was still choosing them, even through distance. They walked back to the living room. The girls ran to him, chattering about the airplane, snacks, clouds. He smiled, crouched down, kissed each forehead, and handed each of them a tiny wrapped box. Inside each, a silver charm. 3 smaller hearts to match the pendant he still wore around his neck. One for each daughter, engraved with their initials, and the word always on the back. Sophie held hers to the light. It's like yours. Exactly like mine, he said. We'll match, even when we're in different places. Even in the sky? Emily asked. Especially in the sky. He hugged them. Not a rushed airport hug, not a distracted squeeze. A real, anchoring hug. And then Maya gathered them, helped them with their backpacks, and led them to the car. Graham walked them out. He opened the door, buckled seatbelts, kissed the top of Maya's hand, slowly, and whispered, "Thank you for trusting me with all of this." She looked up at him, eyes full but steady. "We'll see you soon." The car pulled away, and for the first time in years, Graham stood completely alone. But this time, it didn't feel like absence. It felt like momentum, like the inhale before a step forward. The next week, he worked, not for investors, but for impact. He helped a local shelter secure new property. He met with a school principal about affordable housing programs for single mothers. He closed accounts, terminated old contracts, donated suits, and mailed the last of his tailored shoes to a charity auction. And then he boarded a plane. Seat 22A, right side window. The sky was clear, Chicago shrinking behind him like a memory that no longer hurt. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a drawing. Chloe's rainbow sketch, now laminated and worn at the corners. When the flight attendant walked by, she smiled and said, "Visiting family." He looked at the drawing, at the cloud shapes outside the window. "No," he said. "Going home." The Portland house sat on a quiet street with tall pine trees and a swing hanging from the front porch beam. It wasn't grand. It didn't have a doorman or a skyline view, but it had laughter in the walls and a faint scent of crayons and cinnamon in the air, the unmistakable signs of a home. Graham stepped through the doorway with one suitcase and a carry-on. No entourage, no assistant, just him. He expected noise, but the house was still. A note sat on the hallway table in Chloe's handwriting. "Backyard, we saved your chair." He smiled and followed the sound of wind chimes through the kitchen and out to the yard. The girls sat at a round table under a tree, cups of juice and coloring books spread before them. When they saw him, they didn't run. They smiled like he had just come back from the store, like he belonged there. "Seat 22A reporting for duty," he said. "Daddy!" they shouted in unison, and then the hugs came, loud and overlapping. Maya stepped outside, barefoot, holding a glass of lemonade. She looked at him like she was still surprised he came. Not because she doubted him, but because life had taught her not to expect consistency from the people she loved. But he was here. He crossed the yard and kissed her gently, forehead to lips, hand to waist. "Missed you," he said. "Missed you more," she replied. That evening, after dinner, Graham read the girls a story, something about dragons and pancakes, and stayed a little longer by their bedsides than usual. Chloe fell asleep holding his pinky. Sophie asked if they could build a treehouse. Emily said nothing, but her smile said everything. Later, Maya found him in the living room, lights low, unpacking his books onto a half-empty shelf. "Settling in?" she asked. He nodded. "Finally." She sat beside him and rested her head on his shoulder. "You're not visiting anymore, are you?" "No," he whispered. "This is where I grow old." She looked up, teasing. "You mean the CEO millionaire is retiring?" He laughed quietly. "No, just redefining success." Outside, wind rustled the pine trees. Inside, the quiet hum of home settled into the walls. And for the first time in a long time, there was no need to plan the next move, because the next move was simply to stay. A year later, on a breezy spring morning in Portland, Graham sat in the front row of a school auditorium once again. The seats were smaller, the stage smaller too, but the feeling in his chest had only grown. This time, all three girls wore matching capes for their school play. At the end, Chloe stepped forward, holding a paper microphone. And the person who taught us that heroes don't wear suits, but show up every time, is our dad. Graham clapped, smiled, and wiped a tear. He'd never built anything more meaningful. If this story moved you, if you've ever believed that second chances can rewrite everything, share this with someone who might need that reminder today. Sometimes, the most powerful moments aren't loud or dramatic. They're quiet choices, made in the name of love. Day after day. Have you ever had to choose between ambition and connection? Between staying and leaving? Let us know in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else to hold on just a little longer. And if this story stayed with you, don't forget to follow for more.